In this video, we're going to talk about 3D painting in Blender. So we're going to see some of the tools and the basic functions that we can use to paint our objects using, again, the UV maps. So in the previous lessons, we talked about how important are the UV maps inside our 3D object and how we can first create a material, then apply some textures into the materials, and then apply the material onto the object. And this is probably the most critical part, since we need to understand how we can create a nice UV map for our object. Now, in some cases, this is pretty easy because we have an object like a box like this, so it's pretty easy. And we saw how we can create seams in order to unwrap it in a better and complete way. And after that, we can unwrap and we have our UV texture. We also saw that we can export the UV texture from here in the UV editing mode. We can export the UV layout and we can process this image right here outside Blender. We can use Photoshop, we can use Pixar, which is a free website. We can use GIMP, which is an open source software, and we can create our packaging and whatever graphic design we want to apply to our object in another, in a completely different software. So we have that choice, but we can also do a little bit of painting and graphic design here inside Blender. Now, it depends what you need to do and which tool are you gonna feel more comfortable with. So it's your choice. I'm just giving you different options to do the same thing, basically. So in my opinion, well, I prefer to use other software because they are really specific to create materials and PBR materials and PBR texture. Now, we saw how we can create realistic materials only when we apply different type of textures, which are going to include normal texture or bump texture, and also roughness or glossiness textures. So those are going to give the material that realistic and physically accurate look. So in addition to that, you would also want to apply some defects on your material and so onto your object. So an object that doesn't have any scratch or any, let's say, defect, it's never going to be too realistic. So for example, with metal, you always have scratches and you have worn out edges. So they're gonna have like this type of effects here, like rust and things like that. So the more defects you're gonna add, the more the object is gonna look realistic again. Usually these are the main two effects that we can add. So we can add these worn edges or wear for the metal, but also for other materials like plastic, like the paint that is gonna scratch off and that is gonna age. And we also can apply a little bit of dirt, so to well, make your object a little bit dirty. Nothing in reality it's completely clean, and well, it's gonna look fake even it's a real object. So yes, you can buy a new object and it's gonna be totally let's say perfect, but then it's gonna be ruined after not too long. So you can also download some worn effect alpha channels here to apply to your texture. I'm going to show you how you can paint directly using a mask or an alpha channel and also a texture. So, well, we're going to use the same texture that we used previously for standard materials. Now, before we get into action, I want to suggest you a couple of software here. And I think that the best software to create PBR materials and pretty realistic materials and cavity effects, ambient occlusion, worn out effects, dirt, and so on are these three. Substance Painter, I think this is the best probably because it's like complete and complex like Photoshop. Let's say that it's a Photoshop for materials. And then we have another one here, it's called Marmoset Toolbag. It does pretty much the same thing. But also you have a third choice, which is completely open source and free. And by the way, this is a snapshot from my course in Armor Paint. So the software is called Armor Paint. You can check the entire video course, and you can see how you can create complex textures, materials, layers. So we're going to create different layers. You can see underneath a layer. So let's make an example. You have a layer of paint, and then underneath that you have a layer of metal, and you can scratch off the paint and see what's beneath that paint layer. And also I can suggest you ZBrush, because you can do paint sculpting with ZBrush. So you can do 3D modeling, 3D sculpting, but also 3D painting in a really complete and you can see outstanding results. And then you also have Matbox, which is a little bit simpler and smaller than ZBrush, and it does pretty much the same thing. But well, these are your choices, and you can give it a look and decide which one works best for you. Now I want to start from the beginning, because to paint in 3D here in Blender, you need to have a projection, you need to have a UV map. So let's get started from the beginning again and see the first steps. So first of all, we need to understand what mapping and projecting means. So if I make a little experiment here, I'm gonna use this cube and apply here a modifier. And there is one here especially for projecting UVs, which is called UV project. So if I project this one here, let's also switch to the material preview here at the top. So these are really some basic steps. And I can assign here a projecting material, which is going to be my camera. I will use my camera to project a material onto my object. This is how the UV project modifier works. And now I can apply a texture to project. So I just need to assign a material here. So I'm gonna go, well, I do already have a material. So I can click on these little dots and assign an image texture. Okay, this is gonna be completely dark at the beginning. So I can open up a texture from here. Now let's say that I want to apply a logo or something similar like this one here. So I'm gonna open the image, and you can see now that this is projected onto my cube, so I can move it around. Now if I go into my shading mode here using the shading interface, I can see that I'm not using any mapping at all. This is just a projection with my camera, and this is possible thanks to this UV project modifier. And if I scale down, I can see the logo or the graphic there repeating many times. Now we already talked about the two different ways you can use textures. You can use as tileable textures with repetition, or you can use them just once. Now usually a logo, well, sometimes you want to place it many times, sometimes you want to see it only once. Now those information are also stored here, so you can see that we can say, okay, I don't want to repeat this, maybe I want to extend it, maybe I want to clip it and just project it once. So this is another way you can actually apply some graphics onto your object. Now what if we want to paint this cube? So if I move into the texture paint, you can see now I have the image here, and I can see how it is projected, but I cannot see anything. So I need to change the style here in material preview. Always remember that. Okay, now I can start to paint on my, well, you can see here I only have these textures to paint on. So what I need actually, so let's go a little bit back. Let's go all the way back actually. What I need when I do 3D painting in Blender, I need a complete texture. So let's delete this modifier right now. So as soon as I delete it, this is gonna go back to the original cube UV editing. You can see this is the unwrapped cubed. So if I go back to the shading again, sorry, to the texture paint again, I can now paint on all the faces. Now the important thing is that no faces are overlapping. So you need to be careful when you map your object, when you have your object mapping, that no faces overlaps. Otherwise you're gonna get strange things. So perhaps you're gonna paint right here, but the paint is gonna also appear back there. So you need to be careful with that. Now with the cube you don't have any issue because the mapping is already been done. But what if you start to modify this cube? So I'm gonna go into modeling and start, for example, to extrude. Now let me go back also here into material shading, and I'm gonna get this face from here and extrude, start to create something more complex. Now you can see that we already saw this actually. The pixels get stretched right there, so the paint also gets stretched. So this is not good anymore. What I need to do is first define the UV editing and then go to texture paint. Otherwise, again, I'm gonna have some issues here. I cannot see clearly where I'm painting here. So I cannot paint correctly on these other faces, or I will see, there you go, so you can see this is gonna be total blank, or I will see appearing different paints in different part of the object. So this is now out of my control. So let's go back to UV editing and let's unwrap this. So first of all, again, I'm gonna select some seams. So here in UV editing mode, I'm gonna select some edges, and let's say that this is gonna be my, well, one part of the object. So right click and do mark seams, and maybe here also, I don't know, just figure out. You need to have the correct amount of seam in order for this object to be correctly unwrapped. So I'm just gonna go here and marking some random seams. Okay, when you finish, remember that you need to unwrap everything. So right click and UV unwrap. Now the important part is that each single face needs to be in its own space. They don't need to be overlapped. So to test this, I can go now into texture paint, and well, to paint everything just once, I can paint with this fill tool. So I can fill everything up with a white right there. So then I can go back and start to paint everything, or actually I can just get rid of the material. I think that's gonna be faster. So I'm gonna get rid of this texture. Okay, so everything now turns white again. But what happens if I go back here and if I want to continue to paint? So let me change here well, I'm gonna get rid of this image. Okay, so I have a total white, and here you can change the color, the radius, the strength, and all the characteristics of your brush. So what if I apply a pink paint? You can see nothing happens again. And you say, why? I do have my mapping, so why is nothing is happening? Well, you just got rid of the texture, and you always need a material and a texture to work with your paint. And we can do that real quick. If we go into the material again, click on that base color, and again, we can apply an image texture. Okay. And we are not ready yet because we